The hierarchy of goals, emotion, and meaning. So, imagine for a moment that you have a goal in mind. Perhaps something simple: you want to get to work in the morning. Now, I used to ask my students questions like this when I was teaching, something basic, but that opens a deeper chain of thought. For example, I'd ask them, "Why are you writing this essay?" And they would reply, "Well, because it's part of my class." Then I'd ask, "Why are you in this class?" They might say, "Because I need this course, it's part of my major." So I'd push further, "Why did you choose that major?" And the student might say, "Because I'm interested in psychology." Alright then, I'd continue, "Why are you here to get a degree at all?" They would hesitate, and then answer, "Well, because I think I need a degree to get a job." Why do you need a job? Well, I need a job so I can keep body and soul together, so I can survive, maybe be productive, and hopefully establish a name for myself. And I'd keep going, "Why do you want to do that?" Well, because it's part of living properly. And then comes the bigger question: what does it mean to live properly? And how would you live if you were living properly? And right at that point, most people can't answer anymore. Because you can push the why question again and again until the person eventually runs out of explanations. But here's the point: everything you do, every action, every plan, every little movement in your life, is nested inside a sequence of goal-directed actions. And those sequences can be very shallow, or they can be very deep and sophisticated. If you're not very sophisticated at all, the chain might only go 1 or 2 levels deep. For instance, you might be bored and decide to go out and get drunk. Why? Because you don't want to feel bored. Push it a step further, and maybe you don't want to answer anymore, because that's as far as you've thought. But if you're more sophisticated, you might have a long, well-structured hierarchy of goals. You might say, "Why do I want to be productive and generous?" And instead of trailing off, you could explain, "Because when I am productive and generous, it encourages other people to be productive and generous. If we are all productive and generous together, then there will be more for everyone, we'll get along better, and our societies will be more stable. That will help create a world where people flourish." Now, if someone pushed you even further, you might say, "Well, the alternative is a descent into something approximating hell." And that is why it's relevant. Because life is a battle between order and chaos, between good and evil. And I would rather contribute to order, truth, and redemption than to destruction. Push further still, and it becomes explicitly religious. Am I going to stand on the side of the redemptive hero, or on the side of the eternal adversary? That's the deepest level of why you can get to. And it's useful to know that these levels exist, because the deeper you can make your hierarchy of goals, the stronger and more meaningful your life becomes. So let's imagine that you've come to this talk tonight. Why are you here? Maybe you haven't formulated that explicitly, but something inside you has decided that this is the direction you want to move in. You're aiming upward. Something inside you knows that you should be learning, growing, or at least listening. Now, imagine you come here expecting me to talk about something specific. You expect something that will help you on your path. But then I start speaking, and it isn't what you anticipated. Suddenly, you're disappointed. Why? Because disappointment signals that what you are experiencing is not relevant to the goal you were aiming at. Worse, it might even be interfering with it. And disappointment is always tied to negative emotion. And sometimes disappointment can quickly turn into anxiety. Because if you assumed that I would help clarify your path, but instead it feels like I've disrupted it, then suddenly you don't know where you are. If you don't know who I am, if you don't know what I'm saying, then you don't know what you're doing here. And that produces anxiety. That's the function of anxiety: it alerts you when the path toward your goal has been disrupted. Think about it. Imagine you're driving your car to work, and it suddenly quits on you. What happens? Instantly, you're anxious. Why? Because a few moments ago everything was simple. You weren't in a car as an object, you were in a tool that was smoothly taking you to your destination. The car was just part of your larger goal structure. And then suddenly it fails, and you're stranded at the side of the road. Now your mind floods with questions. How am I going to get to work? What if I don't make it? Will my boss be angry? What if I've already made too many mistakes this week? Will I get fired? Was I stupid to buy this car? Maybe I should have walked. Maybe I should get a bike. After all, that would be better for the planet anyway. And now I'll have to go to a mechanic, but what if I get ripped off again? Maybe I'm too stupid to even own a car. Maybe I'm too stupid in general. Maybe my wife will think so too. That cascade of thoughts, that's anxiety. It is the sudden emergence of multiple possible pathways, when only a moment before, you had a single, clear one. So anxiety is the signal of chaos, the collapse of an organizing narrative. It means your neat, simple story has broken down, and now you're overwhelmed by complexity. Negative emotion, in general, means exactly this, the collapse of a pathway to your goal. But let's contrast that with positive emotion. Imagine I walk onto a stage, and I know my goal is to reach the front so I can speak to you. That's a simple, clear path. Because I know why I'm walking, the pathway produces enthusiasm. Positive emotion exists to propel you forward. That's its function. You feel positive emotion when you can see a pathway to a valued goal. That feeling is literally a motivational force. This is even true neurochemically. When you take a step toward a goal and it works, your brain releases dopamine. It's the same chemical system that drugs like cocaine hijack. But in its natural form, dopamine strengthens the circuits in your brain that were active while you were moving successfully toward the goal. That's why practice makes you better, not just mechanically, but emotionally. Every time you repeat something that works, dopamine reinforces the circuits, making them grow. That feels good. That's why growth itself is pleasurable. And this is why you must be very careful about what goals you pursue. Because every time you pursue something, you are literally building it into your nervous system. If you pursue something destructive, addictive, or unhealthy, you're wiring that pattern into your brain. You're constructing a little internal monster that will chase that goal regardless of the consequences. Positive emotion also has another function. It signals that each step forward reduces the energy you'll need to reach your goal. It's your brain's way of saying, you're on the right track. Keep going. So, negative emotion signals that things have become too complex. Positive emotion signals that your path is clear and progress is being made. That's worth knowing. Now let's apply this to something else. Why do we watch movies? When you watch a movie, you infer the goal of the protagonist, or even the villain. You adopt their goal as your own, at least temporarily. Then you experience their emotions as if they were yours. That's how empathy works. When you listen to someone in real life, you don't first decode their words and then logically deduce what they're thinking. Instead, as soon as you understand what they're aiming at, you adopt their frame of reference. And once you do that, you feel the same emotions. That's what unites people. Now imagine 5,000 people in a room, all paying attention to the same story. If those were chimpanzees, the scene would be violent chaos. But because humans can adopt the same narrative, everyone in the room experiences virtually identical emotional states. That instantly renders everyone's behavior predictable to one another. And what is that? That's peace. That means one of the preconditions for a peaceful society is that people share a narrative. If people are operating from completely different narratives, they can't understand one another. And misunderstanding breeds conflict. So we need a uniting story. The postmodernists recognized that people look at the world through stories, but they became skeptical of what they called meta-narratives, the big uniting stories. They said, be wary of them. And to a degree, that's fair. But the danger is this: if you abandon uniting narratives entirely, you create internal disunity and social disunity. And here's what many postmodernists proposed instead, that the uniting narrative of the world is power and oppression. That every relationship is nothing more than domination and exploitation. That even within yourself, you are oppressing parts of you. That a marriage is simply patriarchal oppression. That a business is just exploitation. And that the political world is nothing but a hierarchy of tyranny. That is perhaps the bleakest possible view of human existence. And I always think of it as an implicit confession. Because if you claim the world is only about power, you are really saying something about the game you yourself are playing. And it's false. Because you can't even tyrannize yourself. Try telling yourself what to do with a whip and see how far you get. Every New Year's, people resolve, I'll go to the gym 3 times a week. And most quit within days. Why? Because there's a rebellious part of you that will not tolerate tyranny, not even your own. You are too free for that. And if you can't tyrannize yourself, you certainly can't tyrannize others for long. Try tyrannizing your spouse and see what happens. Even if you win for 10 minutes, you'll lose tomorrow. Real relationships are built on iterative, peaceful interactions. Otherwise, you'll both collapse under exhaustion. The truth is that lasting relationships are guided by play and mutual reinforcement. That's why the spirit of play and romantic love are so profound. They are instincts that orient us across time, telling us how to sustain each other. When Christ said, "Unless you become like a little child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven," he was pointing to this truth: the rediscovery of play, immersion, and love is at the heart of meaning. The same principle applies to friendships. If you tyrannize your friends, they're not friends at all, they're henchmen waiting to betray you. And in business, if you cheat your customers, word will spread and you will collapse. But if you treat people honestly, fairly, and with genuine care, something else happens. Let's say you're a plumber. You go into a house. The first thing you do is listen carefully to the customer's problem. That's dialogue. Then you work diligently to solve it. If you succeed, you relieve their anxiety and produce positive emotion. That is real service. And over time, that honesty and productivity will cause your reputation to flourish. And none of this is arbitrary. It is all guided by the same hierarchy of goals, emotions, and meaning. Honesty, generosity, diligence, these are not optional virtues. They are the very conditions for inner unity and social peace.